Welcome, everybody. Hi, everybody. We're going to start our program. I wanted to welcome everybody. My name is John McVeigh. I'm actually in my 13th year as a whole bunch of things here at Brooks. I'm actually not related, but the number one question I always get on Alumni Weekend is if I was related to the Mr. McVeigh who was here when a lot of you were, and I am not, but I've heard a lot of stories. It is my 13th year here at Brooks. I do a number of different things. I've actually taught in 3 different departments, our math, English, and science departments. I work in our admission office. I'm one of the dorm parents in Chase House, which you might have had a chance to see, one of the newest dorm here on campus. Coach of our varsity basketball team, and actually this summer I'm going to be transitioning to be our dean of faculty. So I've had a chance to do a lot of different things here. One of the things that I get to do is that I'm the facilitator of our Wilder Prize, and that's an incredibly important part of what I do here, and something that's been passed down. We've had a great tradition, both of speakers and of the folks who facilitate. T.J. Baker's here. He was one of our facilitators for a long time. And on the faculty end, it's definitely a badge of honor to be involved with this. I'm sort of standing at a special place in a special place. The chapel is such an important part of what we do here at Brooks, and this spot is where so much of the public speaking happens. And it happens in chapel every day. It happens with our senior speeches, but it's also where our Wilder contest takes place, and where our speakers that you're going to get a chance to hear in a little bit delivered some of their speeches this past Wednesday to the Brooks School. For 50 years, the Wilder Prize in Public Speaking has celebrated the spoken word, and the spoken word is so important here. It's important on an individual basis in terms of one-on-one conversations that we have in dorms. It's important when you're teaching class, and it's important when we address the whole school. The kids get to recite a memorized speech that they take from a packet of famous speeches going back, a couple thousand years that they can choose from. They recite that memorized speech, and then they craft their own longer original piece. They're then judged on how they deliver those, how they're interpreted. We have a panel of faculty judges that are involved in that. We actually also now get a little bit of feedback from the student body too, which is a nice thing to hear what the students think. It's been interesting as someone who first watched it and now facilitates it. Sometimes it's a sort of a culminating event. We'll have a senior who comes up here and someone who's done it very, very well, and sort of it's a celebration of their career, but it can also be a spark. And for many times, it's maybe a student's first time getting up and speaking to a crowd. And even if they don't win, it becomes something that they build off. We've had kids who early on in their career maybe don't win and then build up and 2 or 3 years later do, and that's a great part of the educational process. There's certainly a proud tradition in here. I actually just got to meet Charlie Walbridge outside, who was part of the first contest 50 years ago. That was really fun to meet. And I get to introduce someone who lives on campus who's one of our past winners, who's going to talk a little bit about what that meant to her. So I'm proud to introduce Kim O'Neill Packard to come up and talk a little bit about her experiences with this.
Definitely have to adjust this down by a lot. So it's too loud. My pleasure to be up here to introduce John and Todd Kobe, who endowed the Wilder Speaking Prize 50 years ago. And I just wanted to say that I was thinking about this recently, this week, and about talking to all of you. And I have concluded that when the history books are written about this phase of Brooks School's history, they will go back to the decision to endow the Wilder Speaking Prize as the most transformative moment in the future of the school. For better or for worse, I might add. And that is because 51 years ago, there was the first Wilder Speaking Prize, and it was a 1-year event, and there wasn't much thought, I think, at the time of it continuing. But the decision the following year to endow the prize was a decision to have this go on into the future of the school. And so 20 years after that, I was a 5th former at Brooks School and decided more on a whim than anything else to participate in the Wilder Speaking Prize. And I'd say, it was a wonderful experience. I loved it. It really, for me personally, changed how I thought of myself. I hadn't really thought of myself as a public speaker. But winning the prize made me think, wow, this is something that I can do. And I never shied away from opportunities to speak after that, whereas I might have had the butterflies in my stomach before that. So fast forward another few years, and I was working in Washington, and I got a call from Michael McCahill, who was a academic dean, I think, at the time. and he asked if I would come and speak to the Brooks School community about my job in Washington. Now, and I said I would gladly do that because I was not afraid of public speaking. But I also would like to say that I don't know that Michael McCahill would have chosen me to speak to the community at Brooks, because they had a young alumni speaker series, so he could choose from 400 some odd young alums who were within 5 years of graduating to come back and talk to the school that year. And he chose me. And had I not won the Wilder Speaking Prize, he may not have known that I could even speak, and he probably wouldn't have taken a chance in terms of inviting me back. And it was on that visit back to Brooks School, to speak to the school about my job in Washington, that I was also the guest speaker in a government class. And that government class was taught by John Packard. And John Packard, the very cute government teacher, wrote me a very nice thank you note saying he would love to get together sometime to talk more about my job. So we did get together and didn't talk very much about my job, and were engaged a short while after that. Now still, I haven't yet said why I think that the Wilder Speaking Prize being endowed 50 years ago will be the most transformative moment, right, in the current Brooks School's history. And that is because if John Packard hadn't met an alum of the school, who came back probably in part because she had won the Wilder Speaking Prize, he would have, about 2 or 3 years before he participated in the search process for the head of school at Brooks, he may have left because he was getting a little antsy and he wanted to be a head of school. And I said to him, I will follow you anywhere if you try to get that job at my school and don't get it. But I'm not going anywhere until you try for that job, because I want to be the head of school's wife at my school. And so thus, as I said, for better or for worse, whether you like John Packard's leadership or not, the Wilder Speaking Prize, being endowed 50 years ago, may be the most transformative moment in the history of Brooks, this current Brooks School. So I'd like to thank John and Todd for doing such a thing and making such a wonderful gift to the school. And at this point, I'd like to introduce them to speak. Thank you.
First, let me say, when we endowed the prize, we had not intended it as a matchmaking service. Now, delighted the way things worked out, and don't want to say that I don't, but I just hadn't crossed my mind at the time. I was young. I really had intended not to say anything but to turn things to my much more eloquent brother, but there's just something about being in a pedagogical setting where people aren't talking to me about municipal bonds that makes me want to give advice. So I want to give some advice. And I have a lot to give, but I want to hit the main point on my mind right now. It may not be the most important, but it's on my mind right now. And that is, I want to be sincere about this and tell everybody that under no conditions, no matter how you're driven to it, do not go to the barber shop I went to on Wednesday. And anybody is free to examine this haircut, and there is much to be said about the circumstances and about the how something like this can happen. But in any case, as I said, I had planned not to say anything, but to turn things over to John. But coming back to the school and seeing that God has indeed made the fields and halls his own, many emotions arose, and I inevitably wanted to share some of them, just a couple. And one, of course, one's reminded of when you come to the school from my generation of Mr. Ashburn, a man of enormous talents, varied and enormous, with a capacity for generosity and empathy equal, and character equal to his talents, which is saying a lot. Now, there's a write-up in here about Mr. Wilder, and I just want to say just a couple things about him. He had many things. He had many qualities similar to Mr. Ashburn's. If you were casting a movie and you wanted to have someone play a senior master, you would jump at the chance to cast Mr. Wilder. Very distinguished-looking guy, and no one on the face of the earth has ever worn tweeds better. Someone told me years ago never to say someone was classy, because it wasn't classy to use that word. But if you go into Wikipedia and you type in classy, a picture of Mr. Wilder would show up. And people have been nice enough to say that this prize honors Mr. Wilder. Mr. Wilder honors this prize as he honored everybody who was fortunate enough to make his acquaintance. Well, my brother and I had been in school in Cleveland, and we were from a small town in Ohio, but we had boarded for a while at a school in Cleveland, and both I and my brother had won speaking contests there. And we had the idea that it would be a good thing to have at Brooks. So we went to Mr. Wilder and told him our idea to have a speaking prize. And he said he thought it was a good idea. And my brother has a different version of this, so you may hear something different, but the way I remember it was he offered to call it the Colby Brothers Speaking Prize, and we both had agreed that we thought we'd name after Mr. Wilder. And Mr. Ashburn, very touched, said he was very pleased with that, and so we left. And I was talking about it with other sixth formers who had nothing but critical things to say about it, universally critical things to say about me in presenting the prize. But one fellow was named Bob Russell, who I haven't seen since I graduated, explained to me that you just didn't give a book every year for $20, but you had to endow something. I didn't know what endowment meant, but Bob explained it to me. What was I to do? I mean, I couldn't endow anything, so I did what my kids do when they need money, is I called my dad. And he agreed to endow it with a small amount. And we went to Mr. Ashburn. We said, Mr. Ashburn, I have an endowment. He said, don't worry. The typical Mr. Ashburn, he said, don't worry. I know you boys, and you're good boys, and you'll find a way to endow it through the years. So I can count on that. In the meantime, the school has taken this contest and made it a major event in the calendar, and they've done it splendidly. I came only once. I was living in Boston. They invited me to be a judge, and it was just too hard. The kids were all great. I wanted them all to win, so I've never come back, because it's just too hard to choose. I hated to see the hard work went to go into and losing. So it seemed so hard to do all that work and then not to win. I don't have really anything more to say, but to assure people that the prize is endowed now, and it isn't just a matter of buying a $20 book. And as I think Jane Austen referred to as, Mr. Collins referred to having a melancholy event. When that melancholy event occurs with me, I hope that I can leave something to make it more endowed, because I appreciate so much what the school does now, but more importantly, what it did for me, which was a lot. So that brings me to the end of the remarks that I hadn't planned to make. And so what I'm going to do now is what I should have done right from the outset, is sit down and let my brother talk.
Boy, how do you follow Kim and Todd? This is a task that is beyond me. Especially Kim, I want to thank you. But I really want to start off by thanking the administration, the professors here, the alumni, and the students for sustaining this noble organization called Brooks. I draw from my lessons every minute, every day. And I want to especially thank Mr. Baker and Mr. McVeigh for making sure that the speaking contest continues. In directing, and I'm sure the students want to begin, but directing my comments to them, communications divides the success often from the not as successful. I use it every day. I do my research, and I'm a lawyer, and I do my research, and then I try to persuade other people to do what I think is the right thing. Often they agree, not often enough. But communication is such that you learn that the tongue is a very powerful part of the body. Let me give you an example of communications and the results of it. And this is somewhat germane to Mr. Wilder and the speaking contest. When my brother was a teenager, he came up here to be interviewed. Mr. Wilder said to him, Todd, we're filled. We don't have any space at all, but I'd like to talk to you. He asked Todd several questions. One of the questions Todd did to convince Mr. Wilder to admit us was, Todd, you live on a farm-like place in a rural part of America. What have you gained from it? Todd nobly said, well, Hercules had several tasks, one of which was to wrestle a Titan who was very strong, and Hercules noted that when the Titan foot touched the earth, he grew stronger. So Hercules held the Titan above his head. Todd's comment was, Mr. Wilder, I grow strength from the earth. That must have impressed Mr. Wilder, because he wrote my father a letter, who was not convinced that we should come here, a very convincing letter. He said, we don't have room for Todd, but we'll make room for him, even if we have to hang a hammock for him. Well, fortunately, they didn't. He had a wonderful roommate, as did I. Well, because of those two convincing things, here we are, over half a century later. And with that, I would like to say, let the games begin, and I look forward to this wonderful talk that you're going to give us. Thank you all.
So today we're going to have a chance to hear from 3 different student speakers, and each will be doing something slightly different. The first of them is going to be Kenza Buanan, who was actually the winner of this prize last year. And she's just going to talk a little bit, rather than deliver one of the speeches, she's going to talk a little bit about what it meant to be a winner, how it affected her Brooks career. And then we'll hear from both Kennedy and Allie, who were competing this year. And Kennedy will be doing her memorized speech, and Allie will be doing her original speech. So without any further ado, first, Kenza Buanan.
Good morning. My name is Kenza Buanan, and I'm wrapping up my 3rd year here at Brooks. I run cross country in the fall, I do the musical in the winter, and in the spring I'm a coxswain for the girls' crew team on one of the most beautiful lakes in all of New England. I can vividly remember the first time I stepped foot on campus. Mr. McVeigh and I talked for what was well over an hour, and then he showed me around. I fell in love with the school. An inexplicable sense of comfort fell over me. A sense I'm sure has encapsulated you at some point as well. Something draws you to this school. 2 years after my first steps on this campus, during my sophomore year, I was in front of all my peers delivering 2 speeches for the Wilder Speaking Prize, one memorized and one of my own on the topic of resilience. Mr. McVeigh was actually in charge and wanted me to take up this public speaking contest that I was a little bit hesitant about. I was a small sophomore girl who was really shy and hadn't really addressed the school fully. But I tried it. I was so nervous to speak. What did I have to offer? What did I have to gain? What I've learned during my time here at Brooks is that I say this time and time again, but Brooks encourages discomfort. It is the only way to grow. The Wilder Speaking Contest allowed me to delve deep into the discomforts, and it challenged me to seek new opportunities. I put myself out there with the support system of my teachers, peers. I spoke from my heart, and I won the prize. It helped show me that my voice in this school matters and proved that effort never goes unnoticed. It gave me confidence to fully immerse myself in this school. If it proves anything, it's that Brooks values what it means to challenge yourself. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Doing the Wilder Speaking Prize opened my eyes and gave me a newfound energy to continue my time here at Brooks. These rich experiences you have had, and I will continue to have for one more year before I become an alum. Whether it's a sports team, an academic award, an induction to society, or a speaking prize, all are intentional and deliberate parts of the Brooks experience. They formulate and shape the person and character that makes you, you. I will carry the Wilder Speaking Prize with me forever. It taught me a lot about myself and a lot about school. These experiences become the foundation for amazing people that Brooks creates. It is what makes a student, a teacher, and an alum all part of a community that will last long, well beyond your graduating year. Thank you.
This year's prompt involved 2 quotes from Frank D. Ashburn. He spoke often about the concept of freedom, and he once stated in a speech in our chapel, "Nothing in this world comes free, not even freedom." In his final speech at Brooks, titled What I Believe, Mr. Ashburn said that only the bond are free, and only the free bond is simply a fact of life. In what ways might these statements be true? That was what we asked our speakers this year. First up in this contest is our students go through and do a memorized piece that they get to choose. Kennedy is going to come up and talk about her memorized piece, where it came from, and deliver a speech, I believe, from Ronald Reagan in 1988.
Hi, my name is Kennedy, as Mr. McVeigh said, and I will be reciting an excerpt from one of Ronald Reagan's speeches that he said at Moscow State University. Go into any schoolroom, and there you will find children being taught the Declaration of Independence, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that no government can justly deny them. The guarantees in their Constitution for freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion. Go into any courtroom, and there will preside an independent judge beholden of no government power. There, every defendant has a right to trial by a jury of his peers. Common citizens, they are the ones, the only ones, who can weigh the evidence and decide on guilt or innocence. Go onto any university campus, and there you will find an open, sometimes heated discussion of the problems in American society and what can be done to correct them. But freedom is more than this. Freedom is the right to question and to change the established way of doing things. It is the continuing revolution of the marketplace. It is the understanding that allows us to recognize shortcomings and to seek solutions. It is the right to put forth an idea, scoffed at by the experts, and watch it catch fire among the people. It is the right to follow your dream, to stick to your conscience, even if you are the only one in a sea of doubters. Freedom is the recognition that no single person, no single authority or government has a monopoly on the truth, but that every individual life is infinitely precious, and that every one of us put on this earth has been put here for a reason and has something to offer. Thank you.
And now delivering her original speech, Ali Ayamonaco.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm a junior here at Brooks. Frank D. Ashburn once said, "Nothing is free, not even freedom." When I read this quote, the first thing I thought of was my Uncle Ken. He was a fighter pilot in the Vietnam War and had a less eloquent reminder of the same thought. Freedom ain't free. It was a phrase he said often, ingrained in his mind. In the war, every time his brigade was about to do a flyover, someone would say, "Freedom ain't free," before they took off, to remind them of why they were doing what they were doing, which was especially important in a war with so little support. His plane was shot down, and he was taken as a prisoner of war for 7 years. He was tortured daily, but ultimately what deteriorated the most was his mind. Later in life, long after returning from the war, he developed Alzheimer's. As his memory of those closest to him faded, his strongest memories were those of his days imprisoned. He had flashbacks almost constantly up until his death. The last year of his life was as if it was his 8th imprisoned. Ultimately, he had to be airlifted from his rehab hospital in Cape Cod to Mass General. And I imagine that right before he took off in his last flight, he reminded himself for one last time that freedom ain't free, and realized all that he had given up in order for others to be able to experience that freedom. On the surface, I thought, of course, there were things in life that were free. Immediately thinking monetarily, I thought back to numbers of times that I enjoyed that didn't cost me anything. But sometimes we pay for things with our sacrifices. You miss hanging out with friends on weekends to study for a final. You lose time with your family traveling for work. You miss out on parts of your youth because you're so focused on the future. As I thought about this more and more, I realized that most of these were sacrifices for what are perceived to be large moments. We sacrifice for what we think will define us, but life wasn't made to be taken in large moments. The next day will inevitably arrive, you'll sleep, and the moment will have passed. But when you have 100,000 small moments, you can step back and appreciate the picture a lot more than going all in on some grand gesture. That, in all honesty, you aren't Romeo or Juliet. You don't have to drink the poison for some flame-out gesture. So all that leaves us with is the small stuff. That is what is truly free to us. Right now, you are sitting on a planet spinning around in the middle of absolutely nowhere. But I'm guessing you want to make the most of it. And I'll tell you why you have to make the small moments count. One day, probably a while from now, when old age takes a hold of someone, they might just only remember your smile. Everything you did together, every second, every moment, gone. Everything you ever did will be reduced to the head of a pin. Maybe you walk into a hospital room to see an old friend or relative, and they remember your smile, nothing else. And they smile uncontrollably, and it will come from somewhere so deep that you'll know you touched them on an honest, primal, and true level that no scientist or savant could begin to explain. What is free is what you have to give without taking anything from anyone else. That may be your presence, your wisdom, or just your smile. And no, you can't put these things on a resume. You can't judge them by an IQ test or SAT score, so maybe they won't be what gets you into college or secures your future. But these are the skills that will set you apart. These are the things that will stay with you, and these are the things that you will be remembered for. We can't live this life with any sense of permanence. One day, even Mozart will be forgotten. So focus now on the impact you can have on those directly around you, rather than trying to leave some grand legacy on this planet. When I first learned how to read, my mom showed me a poem. She told me if I thought of it when I thought of her, that I would understand her a lot better. It says, "I don't know what living a balanced life feels like. When I'm sad, I don't cry, I pour. When I'm happy, I don't smile, I glow. And when I'm angry, I don't yell, I burn." My mom has bipolar disorder, so she can't exactly balance her switch between off and on. Living with someone who experiences astonishing highs and devastating lows has made me realize how important each moment is. When my mom is in her state of euphoria, I can see it in her eyes. The extreme happiness she feels is surrounded by fear because she has no idea when the darkness will inevitably consume her. She experiences extremes of emotion that I will never in my life be close to feeling, and honestly, I'm not sure that I want to. However, the chemical imbalance in her brain did make me value small moments over large ones. Maybe not to this extent, but we will all never know when the next period of darkness will consume us or the ones that we love. So cherish the sunshine and hold on to it tightly. Frank D. Ashburn also said that only the bond are free and only the free bond, which seems like kind of a convoluted way of saying a simpler idea. In a few days or a few years, we will graduate and leave this place. Some might leave here with a summa or a magna on their diploma, others with athletic scholarships or admissions to top colleges. Maybe you were top scholar while you were here. Maybe you were the most involved or the most well-rounded. Those are all excellent achievements that you deserve to be proud of. But that is not what will determine whether this was the most meaningful educational experience in your life. It is the times you had with the people to your left and your right, the nights eating takeout by the lake and the bus rides to away games. The most important part of your time here is the friends you make, the people you meet, and the moments you share. Do you ever realize how badly you're going to miss a moment while you're still living it? Those are the moments that define our experiences here and everywhere. Those are the moments that will become our memories, and those are the moments that are free. Thank you.
So I draw the unenviable task of speaking after all of those speakers. But I want to thank Allie and Kennedy and Kenza for their thoughts, and John, TJ for running it, the Cobies for being here with us this weekend, all of you for joining us this morning. This is a terrific annual event, and I often think that part of what, maybe primarily, what I love most about our school are talks like Allie's, sort of confidence in community. And so I thank her for sharing all that. It meant a lot. So we have lots more in store for you today. Next up is Convocation, which begins at 11:15, where you'll get a heavy dose of me this morning, and then we'll make our way to lunch after that and all sorts of fun through the afternoon. So I want to thank everyone for coming, for being part of this. Past winners, I see John Walsh here, my wife, of course. And we'll enjoy the rest of the day together. So thanks so much. 11:15 is our next start time.